So at this time, I'd like to introduce our middle school staff, and Seven Bridges will be presenting their academic update for you. So, Andrew?
Thanks. Thank you, Christine. So I'm Andrew Corsair, principal of Seven Bridges Middle School. Thanks for having us here. We're really excited to share some of the work that we've been doing. Our focus tonight is on active learning, which has been a district priority in our strategic planning thinking for some time now, and we're specifically talking about how some innovative spaces and furniture that are coming online this year really work to support this vision of active learning, as well as our work with problem-based learning, which is an active learning model of planning and teaching. So joining me is Greg Stiefel, assistant principal. I brought a good team here with me to talk a little bit about a problem-based learning project in 7th grade science. Nancy Solis and Kathleen Kuzma for 7th grade science. To speak a little bit about our work in 8th grade social studies, Jamie Egan and Lori Lichtenstein, 8th grade social studies teacher, and we have 2 students in 8th grade joining us who have experienced and worked on the social studies project. So we have Sophia Jacobsen and Carl Doheny here to join us. I'm really happy they're here. So I'd like to get us started, and we're going to go right down around this way throughout the presentation. So when we're talking about active learning, this is not a new concept. It's been around for decades. It's the sort of work we were doing in graduate school as a training teacher, where we kept talking about the role of a teacher shifting from someone who's delivering content and students who sit there facing forward and passively receiving the content, to switching to learning that asks students to direct some of the learning, to ask questions, to do research, to collaborate, to problem solve, to think critically, to make products together, and to answer their own questions. And the teacher, who's an expert and a content expert, also becomes, there are a lot of words to describe, a coach, a guide, a lead learner. And so the room redesigns and furniture support that model of teaching. And you think in 2018, after hearing about this from, I don't know, the 70s, 60s, we could go back, that all of our rooms would have been designed this way going forward. But in fact, with a smartboard at the front of the room, with a blackboard at the front of the room, locating, sort of content delivery from the front, and desks and chairs that are separate, we're really actually been making do with those constructs, but now are able to redesign purposely for the instruction, and it's actually fantastic. I'd like to show you some of that. So this is that. We're not going to zoom in, and I'm not going to spend much time on it, but you've seen it before. It's sort of the foundation of the active learning goals for teaching and learning in the district, and that's been around for a few years now, and that's the foundation of some of our work, and we're basing it on that. So we'll take a look. A lot of stuff has come online. I know we've been working with spaces and furniture for a while, but this year a lot of new things happening. So let me show you some of this with some pictures. So through this Chappaqua Schools Foundation, this is a room redesign of a 6th grade English class, Pauline Daglio's. And she's a teacher who's working with room redesign before she had the furniture. She had 3 different charts at the front of the room to reconfigure the room according to the instruction and the learning that was happening. And now, by placing the room full of mobile furniture on casters that decentralizes the instruction, lots of room for a teacher to move throughout, to coach students. Those tables all fold up and are moved to the side. I've been in there watching kids work collaboratively, then fold the tables up, move them, and then present with a performance space to the rest of the class. There's this nook over in the corner where students read, and lots of room for a teacher to come around and support the active learning that students are doing. This is a 5th grade class. This came online this year also. It's a room redesign supported for the Chappaqua Schools Foundation. This is Beth Riley's 5th grade. Now this is a room that was designed to support a workshop model of reading and writing. So that's not a new model, right? But instead of shoving square desks together into corners, we have decentralized classroom with 4 learning stations where students group together, work collaboratively, they read and they write actively, give each other feedback, and there's a small group place at the front of the room, so similar to what you'd find in an elementary classroom, for some mini lessons. And then a lot of the times students are working like this, lots of room for a teacher to coach in to all kinds of student learning. This is not a full room redesign. It's a math class, 5th grade, Daniel Cohen. It's an Instagram. And if you notice, we have traditional chairs there, but all of the desks have been replaced with these circular interlocking tables on casters that can move around, providing space for teachers to move around. They're all whiteboard tables. So on the right, we have students who are using whiteboard markers to draft ideas, try out problems, and as a teacher, to get feedback on how your student is doing and assessing them. It's fantastic. You walk around, you can see exactly what they're doing. It encourages revision. So all of these things we want: iteration, coaching, trying out ideas, failing, trying again, working together and are all supported by this furniture. Can do it with the other furniture, but then you're talking about pens and paper, hard to see. This is just a much more ideal situation.
And this is a Spanish classroom. Megan Hughes teaches multiple grades of Spanish. This is also an Instagrant. And here you can see the blue accordion chairs for the students. And the first model, you see them set up like you would in a regular learning environment where the students are at pods or groups of 4 or 5. But then on the right, they're sitting in a circle. So the furniture is much more flexible. An interesting component to these chairs is it changes the posture the students have to sit in, and it also allows them to vent off some extra energy if they have it. It breaks us away from that model of students having to sit still all the time. Also helps them, perhaps get some exercise while they're in the classroom, and students get the choice to sit in these particular chairs, or they can sit in a more traditional chair as needed. In addition to the accordion-style chairs, we have chairs which have sort of a swing mechanism down at the bottom. These can also be adjusted for height, lower for smaller students and higher for taller students. And sometimes there'll be a student whose feet don't necessarily hit the ground, or they're always tapping their feet, or my teachers would say, sit still to me all the time, so I was bouncing my knee up and down. And this gives a student an avenue to, again, spend some energy by swinging their feet, hopefully quietly back and forth over time as they get used to doing that, and also gives them a better place for them to rest them.
Sure, so this particular Instagrant through the CSF was focused on attention and engagement for students, and the idea is you take those moving feet and you don't have like a spinner or something on your desk that's distracting, it's subtle. All right, our Upper Commons went through a major renovation this year. This is supported through the district, where it was always this fantastic open space since the school opened, and it was used sparingly for some, we would have sometimes a PE class in there in a completely open space, and then our Shakespeare Symposium would come up and do some work in that, but it was largely not getting a lot of instructional use. So with this, there's now tons of mobile furniture within there. It's sort of like an iLab model. There's interactive display board at the front of the room. In each of the breakout rooms, there's a castable display. And what you see here on the left side is a 6th grade science class where a student, and this is again that active learning piece, students are watching another student present and teach to them. The teacher is sitting as part of the audience, so we don't have the teacher at the front of them teaching. So it's that sort of the model of instruction that we really like and that we believe in, that's been around for a while, but now the space and the furniture really support that. In the breakout room behind, and there's a close-up on the right, is an 8th grade health class. In each of these breakout rooms, the students are actually creating presentations, videos that they are then revising and getting feedback on by watching them on the monitors. You notice there's not a teacher in that room at that point. These are students collaborating, working together, then to teach their fellow students a bit later, all happening at the same time in the Upper Commons. A lot of good work happening there now, and it's online for much more instruction.
And that space also has the rewritable whiteboard tables in the side breakout rooms for mini conferences, and it's supported by some newer high-tech versions of projection boards, not called smart boards, but they're definitely clearer in terms of the definition and the ability to have multiple students using them at the same time.
Yep, and so every single thing here has come online this year. Yeah. Now, downstairs, our STEAM lab, which is going to be a wonderful learning space that's going to have presentation space for students, collaboration space, computer lab access, sort of materials lab place, lots of old tech and high tech fabrication materials, CNC router, 3D printers, chop saw, the whole bit, is now online. And construction is up to date. So this was January 2nd in sort of undeveloped space. We got January 3rd, it kind of looks the same, but it gets a little bit, as construction goes, now we have some walls going up January 11th. Some of the, and we're doing a lot more electrical work and plumbing work in there. There's the January 12th, and I'm taking a picture every couple of the days from a similar vantage point to sort of track it as we go. And that's coming along beautifully, and September we plan that to be open and running in the school. And so there's a lot of space work, a lot of furniture work, a lot of technology work happening right now. It's very exciting. Wanted to share that with you. Now we're going to switch gears and get to our presentations on the problem-based learning. We can come back if you have questions about the space and the furniture and all of that. So with active learning, this is a model of problem-based learning we're talking about in the district quite a bit now, which starts the learning off by posing a real problem that students are confronted with, that the solving of it requires students to dig in, learn content, develop skills, ask questions, and it's a motivating factor that drives them collaboratively to a presentation and a product at the end. So one question that comes up to my mind when we're thinking about this is, what's the difference between traditional projects? We've done projects all the time, and PBL sounds like a bunch of projects also, so what's the difference between a project I might have done before and PBL? There's probably a lot of things. The one useful way I think about this is that a project might be something you would do to apply learning you've learned in a very traditional way. So you might be in a class, listen to your teacher, you might read a lot, take some notes, watch a movie, have a discussion, gain a lot of knowledge, and then at the end, you apply that knowledge to a project and you come up with a product. PBL will take the project or the problem, puts it at the front, and it drives the rest of the instruction. So, for example, and we're going to get into science in a little bit, but our 8th grade science has traditionally had this stream study. They go down to the stream, they measure the volume of the stream, they learn how to test for the microorganisms that are within the stream. It's really fantastic work that they do. Now what we're talking about is front-loading that with a question that says, could the stream serve Gedney Brook as an emergency water source for the school, if we had to? And so then you got to ask the questions that follow that. Well, is there enough water there? Well, how would we know if there's enough water? How much water do we use? What do we need? How much water flows through the stream? How could we test for that? And now you're doing the same volume study, but now you have a purpose to it. Is it safe to drink? Well, how would we know if it's safe to drink? How could we test the water to see if it's safe to drink? And then it might lead to other questions like, what are the environmental impacts? If we siphoned off all this water, what happens downstream? Where is it heading? How do we get that water up to the school in some sort of efficient way that everyone could use? And so by putting that question at the start of something that was a unit that's been traditional, it drives much deeper learning. You come up with a presentation that you have to present to someone about the feasibility of doing this, and you have to work through a number of other questions and learn a number of different pieces of information and develop skills. So, here we go.
And what guides that thinking for teachers as they're constructing units and lessons is some well-established research. In this case, we've highlighted some of the work of the Buck Institute. You can see some of the 8 components of PBL learning. Some of them are understood in any really solid lesson plan, but ones to highlight are the first one. As you shift toward problem-based learning or making of projects, it has to be an intention to teach significant content, or we lose that part of our board vision. Then you can look at some of the others, but one that keeps coming up for our teachers is the idea of multiple iterations. So number 7 becomes really important. Students get the chance to try a project, perhaps stumble a bit, make a mistake, try a different iteration, attempt a new path. And the next thing you know, they're learning from their own mistakes. So the Buck Institute's 8 components of PBL guide the lesson planning and the unit planning for our teachers as they're attempting this work. And we have some early adopters. First is our group of fantastic science teachers. Thank you both for being here. Ms. Kathleen Kuzba and Ms. Nancy Solis.
Yes, good evening, board members. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nancy Solis. I'm a 7th grade science teacher at 7th grade St. Bridges. Our project began, really, we didn't even know we were heading in this direction. As when our science department meeting met last year, we usually set up a goal that we want to use and try to implement the following year. And we decided that we wanted to bring, even though it's really busy inside St. Bridges with all these nuances, with the tables and everything that we're doing, we wanted to bring science to the outside. So we wanted to implement some outdoor learning activities, 5th grade through 8th grade. 8th grade is already doing a lot of it. So we wanted to do something to support the 8th grade culminating activity of the stream study. The 7th grade, Kathleen and I met this summer, and we were just trying to think about how to best implement this goal, how to meet this goal, and we decided on doing an outdoor learning experience on invasive species.
Just tell me when you want me to click. I'm your clicker.
We're not there yet. And we didn't know how fabulous this experience was going to be for the students and for ourselves, and we're really having a fabulous time. We're going to walk you through what we've done so far. Is still a work in progress, but we've gotten really far with it.
Yeah, we're very excited. And so I guess we can advance to the next slide. So the driving question for us is, what recommendations can we make about managing invasive species in our schoolyard? And so we have a project planner that we took from the Buck Institute. We like the way this planner was set up, so if you want to open up that
I just I'm gonna grab the tab here.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
So we use this design planner to help us focus our project. And anyway, so the summary of the project, kind of the gist of the project is, we're going to focus on invasive species and bring students outside and have them investigate different plant species in a specific area of the school, and then do some research and ultimately come up with some recommendations on how to best manage and possibly eradicate these invasive species in an environmentally friendly way. And there's a lot of skills to be learned along the process. There's collaboration. There's so many different aspects of this project. And so we've started. The students have been really engaged. We had a really great start to the school year. And so if we go to, I guess maybe the next, all right, so there's some pictures on that slide. Those are 3 of the species that are in our study area that students might be researching. We have multiflora rose, we have mugwort, which is Artemisia, and then we have the burning bush, which is a Euonymus alatus. So we're having the students learn the scientific names as well for some of these plants. Okay, so we can go to the next page. Do you want to speak to this?
So the project purpose is really to foster outdoor learning. We really wanted to, we were kind of envious of the 8th grade getting to go outside and really enjoy a beautiful setting. So this is one, and have the students learn the appreciation for nature. Also to support the 7th grade science curriculum with a problem-based learning project, and to also partner with the district's goals. This is something that the district has been asking us to implement in our classrooms, so this was a perfect timing for us. We wanted to also cultivate meaningful PBL experiences by incorporating the 8 essential PBL components, which we just mentioned, and the project that we selected lends itself beautifully for us to implement almost all of these components. We wanted to encourage collaboration, critical thinking, self-management, questioning, writing and reflecting, problem solving, and communicating. One of the things that really has empowered us to really move forward and do so many things with this project is that there is cross-team collaboration. Her classroom and my classroom, because this is outdoor, could now meet and become one classroom. So we've been partnering, and the kids get to work not just with the students in my classroom, but with students in her classroom as well.
And I just wanted to mention, so in order to support the 7th grade science curriculum, so there's several curricular connections that we're able to make through the course of this project. We have classification of living things, so students are learning about classification and how living things are classified. They're using identification keys to identify the different plant species. They're learning about the scientific names of the plants and what the scientific names mean. And so that supports our classification unit. We have some genetics connections, so students, once they start researching their invasive species and they learn about some of the adaptations that these species might have in order to allow them to survive in various environments, that starts getting into some of the genetics connections. We have cell structure and function and processes. So when we start learning about cell structures and cell processes such as photosynthesis and cell respiration, we'll be making additional connections. And then finally, our chemistry of matter unit, we'd like to have students do some soil chemistry testing and see what is the different chemical components of the soil and how does that support some of these invasive species. Does it impact some of the native species? And so their chemistry background will help them to interpret and understand those test results. So we have several curricular connections that we think are pretty important and pretty strong.
Let me just add one more thing, is that the power of observation. Our students go out there and sketch those invasive species in their native environment, and that's also very important for them, because it gives them the exact, they're not looking at a picture, they're not looking at a movie, they're not looking at a video, they're actually looking at the entire environment for that species.
And I just want to mention for collaboration, so Nancy mentioned, we've been able to bring our classes outside together and have the students collaborate, which has been amazing. And once we start getting into the research piece, we're actually going to be utilizing the upper commons. We have the main room and the 4 breakout rooms, which is perfect because we have 5 study groups, and so we're planning on having 1 study group in the main room, and then we have the 4 breakout rooms, so we can have both of our classes in there, and the students can be researching and collaborating and working, together to come up with management, practices as such for their invasive species. So we're looking forward to utilizing that space. And then, so at the bottom there, actually, if we click on, if we click on the self-management link, that just takes us to, so every time we go out, there's a focus, and so the students all have one of these journals, and so this was our outdoor visit number 2. So we gave this to the students before we went outside, and they glued it into their journal, and that was our focus for our second visit. So how diverse is my assigned field area? And they had some guiding questions to help guide their observations and keep them on task while we were outside. So that's one of the ways that we're helping them to manage their learning. And then if we just go back and click on the writing and reflecting.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
So another important aspect of this is a field journal, and so every student has a field journal. I have a couple here, and so this template we gave to the students in the beginning of the year, and this was actually taken from the 8th grade teachers. They shared this with us, and so the 8th grade students all have this template in their stream journal, and so we modified it a little bit to fit our project, and so students have this in the front of their stream journal. So every time we go outside, we have a basic, focus, and so we write down the weather conditions, we write down the date and the time. One of the important things we do out there is we do 5 minutes of silent observations. So we go outside, the students, find a comfortable place to sit, and I put them on a timer, and we sit there in silence for 5 minutes, and they're listening, they're looking around, and they're really just taking in their surroundings. And it's a nice, way to kind of start the visit. And it's just, you kind of decompress and you relax and you kind of are one with, your environment out there. And so after the silent observations, we'll usually ask the kids to, share some of the things that they observed. And what's nice is you can really, you can hear the birds, you can hear some insects. When we first started going out, you heard a lot more sounds. And then when we went out in November and December, we didn't hear too many of those sounds anymore. So the students all have this, and then after our visit, at the very end here, there's a reflection. They're asked to write a reflection on their visit. And the reflection we asked them, that's about a page long. So students are keeping a journal. They're also asked to take pictures to document their time outside as part of their evidence. And then, so they've inventoried some of their plants in their study area. They've sketched some of their plants. We spent some time on sketching. So this is really an important, journal, and this is very similar to what they'll be asked to do in 8th grade. So they'll already know the expectations for that stream study because it'll be, a pretty seamless transition. Okay. Let's see. All right. So that's. All right. Do you want to talk about this?
I'm sure everybody's been to Seven Bridges. This is our study area location, which is to the right of the entrance, right before the circle, as you go, as you're leaving the building. And it's in that area where there's a flat land, kind of, and then there is some bushes going up into some, it's like a little hill, and then lots of trees. But that area is that immediate area right immediately after that, the grassy area to the right of the circle.
Yeah, so it's like where it says like study, like where the S and the T are, it's like that dividing line between the taller vegetation and the grass.
That area, the edge.
It's pretty much, that's where it starts, and it goes into maybe 6 or 8 feet. And there's quite a variety of species, a great biodiversity, and that's pretty much the reason why we chose that area. And these are just some pictures from that area, and you can see it's a pretty diverse area. There's quite a few invasive species there for the students to investigate. And we've divided it up into 5 study areas, and so we have 4 students assigned to each study area, and that's their area for the entire year, because they're also looking at seasonal changes over time, similar to what the 8th graders do.
Yeah, the other thing I want to say about the area is that there isn't any other area in our school where we could access the diversity. So this is a very important area. We walked this summer. We walked everywhere in our school surroundings, and we couldn't find. This was a perfect space for us to do our outdoor classroom.
Right. And then progress so far. So we've been outside 6 times. students, initially we went out and we looked at some of the other areas that we initially visited, and then we ended up in our study area, and we asked the students, why do you think we chose this area? And, many of them recognize that it's a very diverse area. There's a lot of different plants here. And so we've had the students go out and, observe their study area. They've been assigned to different areas. They've inventoried the plants in their area. They've measured their area. They've counted the different plants in their areas. They've collaborated across teams. We spent several days on identification, and we also had several samples that we weren't quite sure what they were. So I took a bunch actually here to Greeley and met with Dr. DeMarie, who's one of the bio teachers. He's also a doctorate in botany. And so he went through and helped me to identify a bunch of these plants as well. And then we had the students collaborate amongst our classes, and they, kind of discussed, what they identified and what, they named the different plants. And so we've gotten about that far. We've also had them start to, do some research on, okay, is this an invasive species? Is this a native species? Is this a non-native? And so that's about as far as we've gone so far. We still need to get into the research piece of this. So this is still kind of a work in progress.
And we also decided that we wanted to make this a year-long project.
Yeah. And so next steps, so the students are going to be choosing a specific invasive species within their study area to focus on. They're going to be doing some more research. They're going to be making recommendations about how to manage and or possibly eradicate the species with environmentally friendly methods. And we'd like them to present their information to an audience, which is to be determined. So we're thinking of maybe having them present either to administration or to peers or to the Newcastle Beautification Committee, the Beautification Board, as a possible audience. In terms of products, we've talked about maybe a TED Talk, some sort of a brochure or a pamphlet or something. We've talked about maybe having them, maybe put something together and bring it to the town, for the community. We've talked about having them do like surveys around their backyard to see if they have invasive species in their yard and, what could they do about it. So there's a lot of different, possibilities with this project. Did you want to?
I just wanted to add that we also are planning some guest speakers presentations so that the students hear from experts how they address invasive species.
Yeah, and then next steps. So we reached out to a few experts. We're hoping to get a guest speaker in, towards the end of the year when the students have some more knowledge. And we're in the process of applying for a Chappaqua School Foundation grant for some outdoor tables. We'd love to get some outdoor picnic tables in our study area, which would provide a workspace for the students. It would be more efficient. It would be a more comfortable workspace, and it would allow them to do a lot of the work outside in the field. Currently we had them take samples and such and then come indoors to do a lot of the identification and the work. But we're hoping that through the School Foundation grant with some tables, maybe some stereo microscopes, some magnifiers, they could do a lot of this work outside in the field, and it would be more meaningful, more efficient, more authentic. And we're also hoping if we have a guest speaker come in, we can have them talk to the kids out in that field area. We're hoping that to have tables out there would really allow us to utilize it, even more. So that's kind of our next steps. And then if we go to just the last slide, so these are just some pictures of students, and you can see it's a pretty flat area. There's some rocks that the students will sit on, but we'd love to have tables just right along the edge there, right right by where the taller vegetation starts, as work areas for the students. And we're very excited about this project. We feel it's a really important learning experience. Invasive species are a really important issue. They're very detrimental, and they're actually causing extinctions, and it's a really serious issue. And so we're hopeful that our students will learn from this and will hopefully be part of the solution to this really important problem.
Great. Thank you. So, when I hear that, I keep thinking, wouldn't it be fantastic to be a student in the class? And so thanks. What we'll do is we'll hear a little bit from social studies, and then we can have time for questions. So I'd like to have Jamie Egan, Lori Lichtenstein, our students Sophia Jacobsen, and Carl Doheny talk a little bit about what's going on in 8th grade with a civil rights monument movement.
Hi, I'm Lori Lichtenstein. So what you see on the right there, which sort of makes sense in a little bit, is a memorial that was designed by Myelin in, I believe, Montgomery, Alabama. She was asked to design a memorial for the civil rights movement. And this is what she decided on. This is the finished product. So you can go to the next slide. Okay. So students were asked, we put the students in groups of 3 or 4. This was in conjunction with our civil rights unit of study, and 8th grade social studies is sort of part 2 of a 2-year course of study in American history. And in 7th grade, it's pre-Columbian civilization up to the Civil War, and in 8th grade, we pick up with Reconstruction, and we get as far into the 20th century as humanly possible. And we don't always go chronologically in the 8th grade, we go thematically, and that's this civil rights unit is an example of that. So we put the students into groups of 3 or 4, and we gave them the task of memorializing a person or an event that contributed to the civil rights movement. And there was choice embedded in that. The kids were given many, many choices as to an event or a person that they could pick. They researched their topic, and then they created, it was sort of 2 products. They created a pamphlet, an informational pamphlet, so that someone coming around could see what it was they were looking at. And then they were given material with which to create a memorial. Can you go to central questions? That's okay. Okay. So if you take a look, when you teach history, you always kind of grapple with, okay, here's a unit of study. What skills do I want to focus on? Reading, writing skills, research skills, and of course, how am I going to make this relevant to 13 and 14-year-olds? And for some kids, it's really easy. But you want, when you teach history, you want them not only to get an understanding of the history and the content, but you want to give them something else to grapple with, something meaningful to grapple with, and you want it to make sense and be relevant to their lives, and to make some kind of connection for them, that they can connect, oh, this really does relate to me, this really is important to me. So if you notice with the central questions, the first 2, well, I'll start with the bottom 2, because that's really the content, right? Why is the civil rights movement an important and enduring chapter in our nation's history? And how did the civil rights movement change the policies and culture of our nation? So those are sort of the overarching ideas as it pertains to history. And with the civil rights movement, we gave them sort of it came after Reconstruction. So we started the year and we did Reconstruction. We reviewed Civil War, we did Reconstruction, and then
Let's sit through Jim Crow.
Through Jim Crow, right. And then we decided, well, we're not going to just continue chronologically because that's not the end of the story. So we moved right into the civil rights movement. And by 8th grade, the kids are well able to understand and kind of make that leap. And what's so nice about the civil rights movement is it's a story that's really still going on today. So that automatic kind of connection for them is there. So the top 2 questions sort of gave them that issue we wanted them to grapple with, right? So you have this information, now what do you do with it? What does it mean to memorialize? How do we memorialize? And when do we memorialize? And what if we're going to create a memorial, we need to make a certain amount of choices and we need to decide what that's going to look like, how we're going to do it, and come to some kind of consensus about it. So, do the next slide. So this idea of memorializing actually started in September. And even before we got into Reconstruction, because of what had happened in Charlottesville, we did little current events the first week of school. And that whole idea with the memorials and whether they should come down or stay up, introduced the students, got them thinking about this idea, because citizens of the United States currently in 2017 were grappling with this. It had happened right before they entered 8th grade. So we talked about that, and that led into sort of the discussion of what is a memorial, and what is a memorial versus what is a museum. And on 9/11, the approach every year on 9/11, we sort of take a different angle with the kids, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So this year in 8th grade, what we did is we looked at a bunch of different memorials of 9/11, and we talked about the significance of 9/11 and how different people around the world decided to memorialize it. So they sort of got the concept of what a memorial was. Then we took a look at Maya Lin, who was responsible. We sort of modeled the project after what Maya Lin had done. For those of you that don't know, I'm sure most of you do, but for those of you that don't, the background is Maya Lin was selected in a nationwide contest to memorialize the Vietnam War. She was at that point a 20-year-old student at Yale University, undergrad architecture student, and her design was chosen from thousands to be the memorial for Vietnam in DC. So there was a wonderful documentary that we watched about her that was inspiring for the kids. It not only sort of showed them the process that they were going to have to go through, but it also highlighted what a memorial really could be. And one of the things we sort of tried to stress with the kids was whether when you make a memorial, there are so many different ways you can go at it. You can be abstract, or you can do a realistic sort of depiction of it. And so that was another thing that they got to grapple with. What is abstract and what is realistic? And some of the kids, of course, you know, to varying degrees, some chose to do a more abstract memorial, some chose to do a more realistic. It kind of had to do with where they are developmentally and what their topics were, but at least they got to think about it, and they got to see a lot of Maya Lin's memorials, which tend to be pretty abstract, so they got introduced to that concept, and Terry Goschel, our art teacher, helped us with that as well. So then what we did is we kind of did an there's sort of a basic core of knowledge you want the kids to understand before they move into whatever project they're doing. So we did an overview of the civil rights movement, the major players, the major events, protests, what it means to protest, and that was actually, I taught 7th grade social studies last year, and that was a carryover from a major theme in 7th grade social studies that we were able to connect to 8th grade as well. Like, look, during the Revolutionary War we protested, and here we are again protesting. And so some kids got excited about that and chose to research topics that had to do with protests and laws and policies. So once they had that basic core of knowledge, they were then able to choose from a wide range of what they would then focus on.
So I'm going to talk to you about the process the students took in completing their project. And once the students were introduced to the project with some detailed directions, 8th graders generally take a divide and conquer approach. So they realized what they wanted to do, they chose their topic, they discussed some initial plans, and then they kind of went and researched their own few ideas, and then they collaborated, most of them on a Google Doc, with their notes. They gathered their research. Then they went into creating their pamphlet. And we tried to elevate it beyond just like a research type paper in a pamphlet. And we were sort of inspired by when you visit an historical site or monument or museum, there's often like an about section on the back where they describe like who's involved in this organization, a little bit about them, their contact information, etc. You might also see that on a website for any company or organization. And we try to steer them to say, this is where you're going to explain your process and how you're inspired and why you took this route versus another, why you made it abstract or why you made it realistic, or the choices that you made. Because we wanted them to really reflect on that in their product. So the pamphlet reflected their research and that they gave a brief overview. And then typically on the back, they had their about section where they described the process and the product. After that, they constructed the memorial with a lump of clay that we'll talk about in a little bit. And they took all different approaches, and some started over again and made a lot of changes throughout, which was challenging, but I think in the end for a lot of them rewarding. So they spent some time and they kept talking about how therapeutic it was working with this clay. Because we never get to do this, it's just so nice. And I was like, yeah, we have to finish. And then towards the end, they were given a reflection and peer rating sheet so they could just stop for a moment and think about the process, what they had done so far, what they maybe would change, and then reflect on working with other people. And then they came to presentation. And they presented to their peers. They presented to some groups of 6th graders and various staff throughout 7 Bridges. There's some challenges on that end that we'll talk about later, but they blew our minds, their presentations. Everybody that came to see was like, they really know their stuff. They didn't have to look at anything, they didn't look at notes, they just talked to the visitors, and they were really prepared. They really dove in deep to what their topic was, and I thought were really amazing when it came to the presentation piece. So the materials that were provided, we presented them with detailed directions in a rubric so they kind of knew which direction to move in. It listed all the steps that they should take when they began the project and as they move forward throughout the project. It included a list of all the topics, so when they got into the group, they could think about it. Many of the topics were historical events or people, but we did include a handful of recent civil rights events and topics, which was interesting to see the directions they went in, if they went for like the history and the events that we already learned about in class, or some of the ones that maybe they don't really know so much about, or they heard about a little bit in the news. We gave them graphic organizers to get their notes together and keep it organized for themselves. We provided library books, and our fabulous librarian, Karen Baker, created an online live binder with lots of different online resources and websites and links to databases that would be helpful, and a list of books that Seven Bridges has in the library that they could check out. So they really had a lot of resources at their fingertips. And in terms of the actual materials for constructing their memorial, it was just clay. And maybe you want to speak to this, because that was really the goal here, just give them some clay and see what they can make from it. Right?
It was kind of my silly idea, because I've been in a workshop over the summer with an organization called Facing History, Facing Ourselves, which is, it focuses on the Holocaust and human education and our responsibility in history. And on the last day, we were given a lump of clay, and they said, okay, you know, create something about something meaningful that was connected to the course. So I thought, wow, this is great. How can I bring this into the classroom? And I consulted with our teacher, Mrs. Koshal, and she gave me some ideas. And it was great, but there definitely were some limitations to the clay, and I guess, should we get into that a little later?
Yeah, and you know, we worked together a lot, and I'm forever the critic, and when she told me about this, I was like, what do you mean clay? Like, what are they gonna do with it? I was very skeptical, but I really was happy with the process and the challenges and how the kids worked through it. And when I saw the clay, it was a small little piece, and I was like, what are they gonna do with this? But they did some really incredible things. The other materials I mentioned before, they had that reflection sheet that they could just stop for a moment and really reflect on what they were doing and consider their work with their peers. And then we used the upper commons at the end for the presentations. So the next few slides are just going to be some examples of the student work. These are just some pictures of the pamphlets. So you'll see the top right is about the Loving versus Virginia Supreme Court case. And they included some profound quotations and just the basic information about what evolved throughout that Supreme Court case. And then on the back is where they describe their process and their thinking behind the memorial. And that was the about section.
I'll just say what I like about the pamphlets was that it brought another skill into this. Obviously, we're always focused on writing and how can we get them to write for different audiences and in different ways. What I like about the pamphlet is it brings the technology piece into it. They had to figure out what programs to use. Do you remember what program?
It was Lucid Press.
Lucid Press, or there was another one. And we quickly learned that one was superior to the other because you could share it, right?
Yeah.
And I like the idea, though, that they had to sort of figure out how to, not only how to use this new program that most of them had not used before, because most of them use Google Slides or Google Docs, but that they also had to figure out how to lay things out, you know, how to organize pictures and text and make it look pretty, so to speak, because that is a skill that they'll carry forth into their
We want them to be proud of their
careers.
work, you know, when they just throw some things on a piece of paper, we always say, like, go back, is this what you're proud of? Is this like your best work? And you know, it takes, you know, when you have different personalities working together too, and they had different ideas, it was challenging for some of them to work through that, but I think in the end it did work out. So this is a copy of the reflection sheet. I can't read it so well from here. I have a copy here. So some of the questions that we asked them, I always feel it's important for our teaching to get feedback from the kids. If it's a total bomb and they hated every step of it, I think to myself, like, okay, what happened? But we asked them, how do you think your group's project turned out? Is there any part that you thought, is there any part in particular that turned out great? Is there any part you wish turned out differently? What were the directions materials useful? Because that's really important for us in our next steps, thinking next year, what we can provide to help the kids better. And then we went back to the initial central question, which was the purpose of this was to memorialize an event or person. Do you feel like you did that? And for them to think about that. And then they had a section to rate their group members on how they work together and their approach to it, which revealed some interesting information.
Although they were all, I have to give it to them, they were all very constructive. Nobody was I think that group work has clearly been working at the middle school level because this is 8th grade and this is their way out, and there was really, everybody was very respectful of their peers. And I saw that both in their personal interactions, but also on paper.
Here are some pictures of the actual memorials. They're still upstairs in the display case at Seven Bridges. They're small, but I can speak to a couple. The one on the left, the far left, is a memorial to, again, Loving versus Virginia. And they took a realistic but sort of abstract approach to this, and they had a court setting, and they had the two people getting married, and instead of the woman's face, they constructed it to look like the state of Virginia. And then on the other side, they also took a more abstract approach. It wasn't like an actual person, it was more of an object, and I can't exactly recall what it was. And we're going to talk about what happened to some of these projects in a minute. And then they had the arch over the courtroom, like where the judge would sit, to like represent a wedding arch, but also a court setting. So they really thought outside the box on this one.
I'll talk about the other one. So this is also Loving versus Virginia, and I love this story because this speaks to the limitations of the play. So this particular group worked really, really hard on their original design, and then the day before, it broke. The play was not as strong as we had hoped. So the group panicked, and they stayed. I said, I'll stay after school with you as long as you want. And what wound up happening is they said, okay, well, what was the problem with the first one, which was a ring, actually, with something on it. And they said, how about this idea? They actually made it more abstract. So this is 2 interlocking wedding rings, and it says, love is for all on one, and I can't quite remember what the other one says, but it was actual quotes of Mildred Loving that she and her husband had said, oh, tell my wife I love her, or something. So it was actually a quote that they had said to each other at some point in, like when he was arrested. And so, you know, so this idea of sort of interlocking love, it was actually much more abstract than their original idea. And when they got done, they said, I actually like this better than what we did originally. And we did it in, you know, a half an hour. And I explained to them, you probably couldn't have done it in a half an hour had you not had the background, you know, that you have, but it was still a good lesson. And, you know, the frustration and the overcoming the frustration, and it was good for us to know also. And then on the right is a more realistic memorial of the 1968 Olympics and the Black Power. So, move on. Some other pictures. Yeah.
The one on the left is a memorial to the Selma to Montgomery March, so their bridge was the focus.
And they were also actually told that if they wanted to provide other construction materials, they could. And so you can see the student on the left that's not made, the bridge is not made out of clay.
So really quickly, the challenges, some of the recent events, which included, for example, the Black Power demonstration at the Olympics, or the election of Barack Obama, or the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, the research materials were more limited, especially to be at the reading level. You know, they kind of just Googled some articles that were kind of above some of their understanding, and it was hard to break it down and make it, you know, easy to understand and work with. So I've already thought about trying to curate more materials that will be at a better reading level for recent events if they go in that direction. The realistic versus abstract approach was interesting to us and amusing, because some people just wanted to recreate exactly what happened. We saw several of them, and then others really thought it through and thought outside the box and created these more abstract representations of these people or events. The fragile materials were probably the biggest problem that the kids had to grapple with. They broke many times. When I was putting in the display case, the shelf slipped and fell on about 5 of them and crushed them, which was really frustrating. We managed to put some of them back together, but that was a huge frustration for the kids, but they managed to work through it, which was pretty admirable. And the audience piece. We want to move beyond them presenting to each other, because they kind of know what's going on, and it was hard to locate students that were not their peers, because we have different schedules than the other grades. If one, let's say 5th grade brought their class, then they would be behind the other ones, and it was hard to get people to come. Not that they didn't want to, because the ones that did loved what they saw, but just to organize that and coordinate it was difficult. So I mentioned a couple of these already. Preparing some materials for recent events would be a goal of ours. And in meeting with Andrew towards the end of this process, he gave us some really good ideas for moving forward and making it more authentic for the kids. And instead of having an informational pamphlet, what if, like Myelin, they drafted a bid to try to win this bid to create this memorial? And they're competing against others. And then how would that elevate their writing to be something completely different? Instead of regurgitating research, it would be a completely different product that way. We mentioned, earlier how we would like to maybe investigate some other building materials since there were so many challenges to the clay. Andrew had also given us the idea, well, what if they did the memorial first and then wrote about it? And we thought that was really interesting and something that we definitely would consider exploring for next year. We also think we would bump up the reflection piece a little earlier to give more time to kind of stop and adjust and go back and edit a bit more. And then we thought a wider audience would be interesting, maybe getting kids from Greeley to come and see their presentations, reaching out to the community. Like, wouldn't it be cool to have an architect from the community come and give some real interesting feedback to the kids on this process in the memorial? Some of the next steps, we do a lot of project-based learning already. So we want to look at the projects we already have coming down the road and thinking about how we can apply some of those Buck Institute components. We're looking at the ones we already do and really fine-tuning it or including more. So we have a World War I museum exhibition coming up pretty soon. That will be a really great tie-in to what they just did for memorials. At the end of the year, we're going to combine our classes to do a Cold War wedding, where they get a list of all of these figures in the entire era of the Cold War. And the premise is, okay, the Cold War's over. Now the United States and the Soviet Union, not only did they make up, now they're getting married. Now you have to figure out where you're going to sit all these people at the wedding, and why would they sit there? And it's a lot of work because some of these personalities would never be in a room together, let alone sit at a table at a wedding. But it really makes them think deeply about it and consider a lot of problems and how to address it.
So these are actually the projects of the students that are here with us, and we're going to ask them some probing questions so that you can get their feedback and their perspective. So on the left is Sophia Jacobsen and her group, their project related to the inauguration of Barack Obama. So Sophia, I was hoping you could tell us how you came to decide how to memorialize this event in history, because really not only was your final project abstract, but your topic was a little abstract, and I know that some people in your group kind of grappled with that also. So.
Yeah, well, we started out, and our group, we had a lot of different personalities in our group, so we really went back and forth determining how we would memorialize this really important event. And we went back and forth. We were going to do a bench, and we were going to do a platform, and we decided on a slide, not because it would describe it better. So as you can see, in the first picture, it's a slide, and the stairs going up. I know that you can't really see it, but the stairs going up, the first stair starts out at slavery, and it goes up from there, like Little Rock 9, and the last one is the proclamation that ended slavery. And going down the slide is a quote from President Obama himself, and it says, "We carry forth that great gift of freedom." And it shows that that freedom that was shown on the stairs, that hard work, getting to this point, now you're carrying it forth. And on the very bottom, there's a platform that says Barack Obama's inauguration and the date. And we went for this type of thing, kind of show how it got there, and less than the actual event. So we went the more abstract way, and it was kind of when you're you're going up the stairs and you're getting the hard work to finally get there and enjoy the ride. And it was really a lot of going upstairs is not that hard, but it's more of the theoretical thing. So going up, there's all the different events that led there, and as you go up each stair, it's going as time periods go on, and it shows that as you put the hard work and the effort, it will pay off to great things like President Obama being inaugurated, and that's really how we thought about it and how we came upon that. And yeah, that's really what we did for that.
Thank you. And Carl, you articulated very nicely some challenges that you and your group experienced. So can you talk about some of those challenges and how you persevered?
And also, you can also describe what your monument
Well,
is about.
when you make a project, there's definitely going to be conflicting ideas. So you have to come together and work on a single solution. And our idea was it had to be a fist because that was the symbol. So we put my hand onto a big block of clay. And
You have the Olympics, right?
yeah, the 1968
Yeah.
Olympics, and we just closed my hand and shaped around it. And my friend was saying maybe on the palm of the hand it should be the names of the people who contributed and the people who fought for equal treatment, holding up everybody else. And on the steps it's like the main people, such as like Malcolm X or I think it's John Carlos, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Yeah. And when some of the people in my group didn't agree on things, you can't tell someone that their idea is horrible and you just want to scrap it. You have to say, okay, maybe we should try a different approach and combine your idea with this, which we have to do like 5 or 6 times because I kind of dropped it once. But after it all came together, we were really satisfied with what we did, and we're glad that we adapted to our different views of the event and how we came together to fix the single problem that was this presentation.
And you did this like almost at the last minute, right? Like, didn't you like switch gears a little bit when
We
you had
did.
those challenges?
We because we tried to make it a 3D fist that was just shaped by it. And then we said, well, since this is clay, this can be too hard. It was really hard to make, so we just said, why not use the clay to make the fingers and the hand rather than just make an entire fist? So it was much easier to think that together than rather be split apart.
Carl was so positive when most kids were losing their minds about the clay. At the end, he was like, you know what though, everybody had problems and they worked through them. And I was like, you are so right, you know? So I always had it in the back of my mind thinking about how he could share his experience because he was so positive and it was really refreshing to see.
How did this project compare to other ones you've done in social studies in terms of what you got out of it, either one of you?
Well, I mean, I thought for like one, in like past projects, it's usually like, here's the information, like here's what you're gonna do. And for our team, like we went through the information and like we kind of like dug up the good stuff in some ways. And we really tried to like get that and inform like the audience of like how you're gonna do it. And it wasn't necessarily like a very like detailed like, here's what you gotta do, like this is how you're gonna do it type of assignment, which I mean in some cases I do like, but for here it was a lot of like area of creativity and a lot of like how Carl was saying, like everyone has a different idea, and in some ways you get each person's idea and you put it together and you come up with something that's really cool like that, which is really different from like other projects that we've done.
Expanding on Sophia's idea, the idea of we didn't have like weeks and weeks and weeks of learning about a certain subject. Our groups were chosen by us, but our topic was randomly chosen, so we had to adapt to learning about this certain topic rather than already knowing and just putting our information into words. We had to think of it in our own words and make our own ideas out of things and choose things for ourselves rather than just using something out of a textbook that our teacher told us.
So insightful.
It really is.
Thank you. So, the final question that we have right for ourselves: this innovative learning space is a problem-based learning. How are they connected? Hopefully, it's pretty obvious that what we're asking kids to do is engage actively in their own learning. So, part of what you get there, we know our students learn content really well, and you know they can adapt and learn it in very different ways. One question you have to ask is, what are they doing with it, right? And what skills are they practicing? So we could have them sitting there and listening and taking notes, and they'll memorize a lot of content, and the skills they'll practice will be listening and taking notes. What we see our students doing here is, as they're learning great content knowledge, they're analyzing, they're prioritizing, they're researching, they're compromising, they're collaborating together, they're solving problems, they're asking good questions, and then they're creating out of that, and they're able to speak articulately about that kind of work that they're doing. And that's a much higher level terms of the kinds of thinking and the kind of practice and the kind of skill work that they're doing while they're learning the content. So it's not an either or question whether you do content or whether you do skill work. It's a question of what skills are you going to be practicing as you're learning the content work. And this active learning is really the way to get at these higher level thinking skills to really engage the students and have it stick. So the spaces are designed to support that work. And we're pushing out of those spaces. So you'll see kids in the hallways working in groups on laptops because they're on top of each other in the classroom. And it used to be, I came here and said, what are you guys doing here? We've got the upper commons. It takes a while for us to start thinking about it. Now the question is, what are you doing here? And it's like, the upper commons is booked. You can't get in there now. and so these kinds of spaces, the technology, the furniture are supporting that and optimizing our ability to do that with our kids rather than making do. Okay,
That's so right. My takeaway here is that, imagining this project after the new innovative learning space is created at Seven Bridges and what you guys could construct in terms of prototypes for memorials or potentially real monuments to historical figures in that space as well, and thinking about all the authentic work with the combination of an architect and the growth in your own thinking as you're wondering about these incredible ethical moments in our history. Thank you.
Awesome.
I don't even know what.
Thank you so much. Just before we ask questions, I just want to let you know that, as you know, this community passed a $4.2 million bond to support these projects, and you have just really explained.
42.5.
42.5. What did I say?
4.25. That's okay.
Sorry, it's almost 9 o'clock. It's been a long day. $42.5 million. And you've just really articulated so well why we did that, and have given the community confirmation of why they supported all that investment and the work that's going on. So I guess I'll open it up to questions
I've got so many
from our
questions,
board.
so I'm going to try and make it, I know you guys are all tired. And I'm going to start with you, Kathleen, because when my daughter comes home and says she does nothing, I can now go home and say, oh, no. I know exactly what you did. Were you aware of how many invasive species we had at Seven Bridges or in the area?
No, we weren't, because, even though we both have degrees in biology, neither one of us are really plant, experts. So no, we really didn't realize. We walked, when we were trying to decide where to, have our study area, we walked the upper field, and there's definitely some invasives up there. There's some invasives, there's some Japanese stiltgrass on the way into Project Adventure, and then in the woods there's really not a whole lot. So when we got into that field area that we finally decided on, we noticed the diversity, and we said, well, there has to be invasive species here. There's just so many different plants. And, so we started identifying, and then as the kids were out there identifying, and then when I met with Dr. DeMarie, I was like, wow, there's quite a few invasive species here. So yeah, there's actually more than what we initially realized
So
when
you
we
guys get
first
learning.
started.
You get learning and knowledge out of this as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So one thought that I was having is, have you worked maybe cross-curricularly with the history department to figure out how did those plants get here? What was happening at the time? Does it coordinate with the 7th grade curriculum about this area and the 1700s or 1600s? I just think. Sorry.
We haven't.
I was just wondering if you mentioned the 7th grade curriculum.
And we were thinking the students would have to research the history.
Yeah.
Where do they
How
come
to get
from?
here.
How do they get here? That was part of our planning, but not the collaboration with the cross-curricular collaboration. We haven't thought about it because I'm not sure that the 7th grade, and Laura, you can speak to that.
Yeah, it's fairly prescribed what we have to teach. There would be sort of maybe backdoors, like if you're studying the Native Americans, maybe there'd be ways to kind of fit it in there, but it might be
Timing.
stretched.
Yeah.
And just, we talk about, in the bond project, we talked about some of the outdoor facilities for athletics in terms of classrooms without walls. And I think that this is another great example of how we can use the outdoors as learning spaces, and we're not limited by walls and furniture. So that's very exciting.
Utilizing the wonderful properties we have,
Yes.
not just inside.
Seven Bridges is doing this across all the 5th, 6th, and 7th, all the grades in the science department. We're all doing outdoor learning now because we have such a beautiful facility that lends itself to bring the classroom outside and find meaningful ways for students to experience the science.
Okay, now I'm going to switch to social studies. I mean, it's an overwhelming thing that you guys were working on. And Sophia, I'm going to jump off something that you said, that you were able to pick out the things about the inauguration that were the positive ones. And I think that's an important part of when choosing to memorialize something, how you do it and who's doing it and what parts of it you're showing. And I think that you guys had to go through that process, and I think that's amazing. And then Carl, the way you spoke so politely and said, I'm jumping off of what Sophia just said, that's something that we have been talking about at board meetings for years, about that kind of listening and hearing what your peers are saying and acknowledging what they've said and that accountable talk. And it's just wonderful to see it in action at an age where people are not always so nice to each other. So I applaud you for that. Is this something that you felt you learned the material better because you did it this way?
I think I really developed like a better understanding for the material, and I think like even I mean as a teacher showed it on my test too. I mean, I think like it. I think like I had a better understanding of like the themes and like how like this really progressed and how you like can understand better like something by like actually like jumping in and like this is something that didn't happen too long ago and we were alive for it, so it kind of like again like mattered more for me in some ways. So it made me like understand that more, which made me understand like the history more too, and that's how I felt.
If I could jump in there, an interesting conversation I had at the end of this when the kids provided me with feedback, and I shared this with Andrew. A few kids were like, well, we only really knew our topic. We wanted to know more about the others. And we were talking like, is it because they're wired to learn that way? They think they need to learn a ton about every single topic? Is this a new way of learning for them and they're not used to it? Or were they left wanting more? We don't know because it's the first time. And while we did give an overview at the beginning, we didn't dig really deep into every topic because A, time, and we wanted them to choose one to dig deep into. But it was an interesting set of feedback that we hadn't considered, really.
And Lori, I'm going to pick on you because I know you're also an English teacher. Are you seeing the perseverance in the writing that they're doing when they're doing something that breaks and they're able to, move on and redo it? Are you seeing the ability to edit and rewrite something when that's usually a harder
Yes,
thing for others?
and that's a very good question.
Especially collaborating
Right.
and writing.
To be brutally honest, it's a skill we still need to work on. I think what they are getting very skilled with is writing for different audiences. When you looked at these pamphlets, I felt that they understood what it meant to write an informational pamphlet. The audience was clear. Editing, revising, I think, it's very much a developmental thing in middle school, and most of them are just not there yet in terms of, there's still this kind of one and done sort of approach to writing, and I do. There's a lot of editing actually that I see we need to work on that we maybe didn't need to work on a decade ago in terms of kids now using, texting a lot. We're seeing a lot more like, for example, lowercase i's, that I didn't even understand. Right, exactly. That they'll then forget. But I'm not worried about it, because I do think, we keep hammering it, we keep working on it, but I do feel that a lot of it in middle school is developmental with them.
There's also an inquiry, we do the APPR, Professional Performance Review, an inquiry project and question shared by a number of teachers that are getting right at that question, the willingness and what's creating a barrier for students to want to revise their own writing. Once it's on the page, we don't want to touch it, it's great, took us a long time to get there, and how do we have students taking feedback to dig back in and tear it back apart and revise, and that is a particular challenge, and we have some folks actually working on that.
But I will say one nice thing about when they work in groups is that they have that self-check mechanism. Because, for example, if Sophia and Carl are in a group and Sophia writes it, it's almost become automatic that, well, then Carl will edit it. And we teach them to edit both for content and for sentence structure, punctuation, and grammar. So that kind of does work in a group.
And that's not without problems either, but another one to work because so-and-so changed that, and I didn't want that change. So it's, again, another challenge that they had to work together on.
I think, I think Sophia and Carl are very articulate, and I don't know if you're particularly articulate, or one of my questions is also, do you feel more comfortable speaking about this because of the way that you dug into the material?
Yeah, because you have an actual understanding of your topic rather than just saying like general things that you've heard.
Right.
Someone asks you a question about it, you can actually respond because you know what you're talking about.
Because I see the comfort level that you have. And I'm curious if you also see that they are more comfortable being asked and responding and not having any kind of reticence to talk about it because of the process that they went through to get there, as opposed to studying it or reading about it and hearing a lecture on it. It seems like it's right, the connections and the depth is
Well, the
much greater.
forum, I think the forum for this was great. So for example, I know, again, going back to 7th grade, I taught 7th grade last year, and in English we do this big speech unit, and it's wonderful. And the kids give speeches, but you see a lot of nerves,
Right.
a lot of nerves, because it's one child getting up in front of the whole class, and it's obviously a skill they need. But the difference with this is they're speaking to small groups, and they're
Science
doing
fair
it,
model almost.
right, and they're doing it over and over and over again. So they give a small presentation to a group that comes, and then that group moves on, and another group comes. So they're honing their skills. They're also working with 1 or 2 other children so that they get practice in doing it, and it does build the level of comfort, and it's not intimidating because they're speaking to smaller groups rather than to the whole class.
And I think what adults had commented on that came to say that they, exactly what you said, it struck them how comfortable and how well they knew their topic. They weren't reading off notes, they just spoke to the visitors like, this was like a career for them. And they remarked exactly what you had said, so.
Is there comfort in the collaboration? Because it's not like you've just taken your idea and are presenting it one-on-one. So when it's a group effort, do you feel more comfortable than discussing it?
I liked it because it's with people you know, so you feel comfortable working with them, and if you don't know something, there's a chance they might know it, and they have your back. If you mess up on something, they can correct you, and you're like, oh, thanks, okay. Instead of someone you don't know just correcting you and not telling you why or how you got it wrong. It's nice to have someone who you can depend on to help you, even if you're wrong at times.
I mean, I think also it's like the fear of like sometimes people talking, it's like the fear of like being wrong.
Right.
And when you're working with a group, like there's less like when there's 4 people looking over it, there's less like I'm not sure, I'm not gonna share, like, or like I'm wrong, like I don't want to like talk about it. Like I think there's more of like I know I'm right. Like a lot of people looked it over. Like I'm willing to like share what I've like discussed and like talked over with people already because I know it's like gonna be right.
We're turning history into a team sport.
Right. That's great.
So, my question's for the students. But first of all, thank you for coming tonight. We love it when you guys come, all the students come to our board meeting and listen and learn, and we get to learn from you. So I know Allison mentioned that we're doing a lot of building, and so did Vicki, regarding all these projects we have on, and so did Mr. Carcilia. I'll get to that question in a second. Earlier, you said that you worked with Mrs. Koschel, right? Did you do your artwork in the art class, or did you do it in your social studies class? You did it in the art room.
In our own classrooms. I would love to dig deep and do an interdisciplinary project with art and have Mrs. Koschel teach sort of abstract art versus realistic art, and she would love it also. The issue is that not all our kids have art the same quarter. So it would be about 25% of the kids at any given time that would be in art class. So that's kind of a challenge.
Okay. And then regarding all the building and the STEAM lab and everything else, there was a picture there. I just want to ask you guys, do you sit on the accordion chairs and do you like them? Yeah, be honest.
Blue ones?
Yeah, the blue ones. I think they were cool.
I like the green ones that are in the upper commons. Those are kind of fun.
Those are like the little wall ones?
Yeah, because when you're in a chair and you get really bored, you're gonna fidget around. You're gonna like move your arms and move your legs. But with that, you can just like subtly bounce and make like a little distracting. if you're thinking about something and you don't like sitting still while you think, that can be a good way to have something to do while you try to think of a solution to something or think about what someone said and how to change something or how to fix it.
So you sort of like that.
Yeah, I mean, going off what Carl said, like, I have Spanish in that classroom with blue chairs, and I think they're really fun. I mean, we always start our days with, like, the 10-minute, like, reading of the books, and I think, like, sitting in the chairs, like, not just, like, you move around and just kind of, like, fidget, even though for, like, people in, like, my classes and my friends, like, it's hard for us to sit still and, like, just, like, concentrate on one thing. I mean, it gives you, like, a chance to move around and, like, do something other than reading Spanish, which may not be the funnest thing.
Thank you. Thank you again for coming tonight.
Pleasure.
I just want to thank everybody for coming and making their presentation.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'll let you go home.
Well, so I just have a couple of questions for the students. I just want to echo what's been said, that you are so articulate and confident, and it gives us a lot of hope. I just want to ask, you said that you felt you learned a lot more by doing these projects in this way. And one of the things that really helps students learn in a deeper way is their excitement about learning and curiosity. So I just wanted to ask you if this way of, this kind of project-based learning method, did that make you more excited and curious about what you were learning, rather than, doing it the other way around, rather than learning the information from a teacher and doing a project at the end? Did you find that you were more excited about, I don't know if I should, as a lawyer, you don't ask a question, you don't know the answer. But were you more excited about going to school, about going into that class to do the work?
I mean, I always think it's more fun. Like, I always look, during that part, like that, I always not like I'm making it, like, I did look forward to that class rather than sitting, like, in another class, because, like, I think it's more fun. You're also working with your peers, which is more interactive, and I think it's, like, it was also hands-on, which is, like, a really fun activity to, like, look forward to. And I think it was also, like, a cool thing because for some of us, we did, like, current events. Like, I know mine was, like, we did a current, like, more current type of thing. So it's, like, something more you can, like, talk about with adults rather than, like, something that happened in history where maybe adults, like, either don't care much, but, like, you care as much, and you can kind of, like, have, like, another discussion with, like, as an adult, where they treat you, like, as an adult the same way. So, like, something that worked, like, equal, kind of, in a way.
Do you guys have some choice with regard to what you dove deeper into once the survey was over?
Yeah, we had about, like, I think it was, like, 30 options we had. So, like, depending on, like, I think half and half were, like, current event and history, depending on what you and your group, like, decided or wanted based on people inside and what everyone wanted to do.
Great. And for the teachers, did you find that more kids were involved in projects and were more interested? Like, I know that, there are varying levels of interest. There's some kids who usually don't participate. And did you find that this different method of delivering instruction was more inclusive of different learning styles and different personalities?
I gotta say that the accountability, is really high, and when we do, the students actually own their learning. You just give them those guiding questions, those prompts, and they go about it, and they come back, and you could talk to them about it. And when you come in the classroom, it's like the teacher's not there. The students are just engaged, sorting their plants, cataloging them, putting them. We're going to use A. Are we going to be alpha? Letters? Are we going to use numbers to catalog? And they're asking each other questions. So the interactions are just very independent learning, active, engaged. If you walk into the classroom when the students are or walked outside, you could see that the students are just doing their own thing, talking to each other, asking each other questions. Did you count that plant over there? There was this one, did we miss? I mean, the interactions are just so incredible. So I can tell you that accountability is very high, and you could walk in and see that. Right. It's not even censored. You don't even have to question. All the students are on doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's the value. I'm like, I ask myself, why haven't I done this before?
Right.
This is my biggest question. I mean, I think about that often. I've been at Seven Bridges for 7 years. And I thought about this project, but I just never thought it was going to be so meaningful for myself and for the students.
Well, that is really, truly wonderful to hear. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you. This was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, Greg and I are just so proud of our teachers and our students, and to be part of Seven Bridges, and really proud of you too. Thank you so much.
Yes,
It's
thank
you
you.
guys are
Very
absolutely fantastic.
I just have I wanted to thank Andrew for structuring the evening for us, and I just wanted to note, we just went through a process where we talked about what skills and attributes are important to our community, and every single one of them was demonstrated tonight by our faculty with our students. And we didn't mention, but I do want to point out how important it is for teachers to reflect on how they can do better. And both of you, your teams articulated how you're constantly revising your own work for our kids, and I really appreciate that. And again, want to thank you for coming tonight, and your parents for allowing you to be here. I think they're in the audience. And again, we really appreciate you presenting to the board tonight, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening.